my talk title is Qualia Structure Paradigm, constructing Qualia Periodic Table to dissolve the hard problem. It's a bit ambitious title, and I hope that this will be interesting to you. And this is all, pretty much ongoing kind of thoughts and concepts. So please discuss and also think about it during the discussion time. Okay. The outline, I will go briefly the definition of the terms and the background, and then to introduce the Qualia structure paradigm theoretically, and then I'll talk a little bit about empirical research example, and then the core talk that I want to discuss with you guys is the future outlook part, Qualia periodic table idea. All right. So the definition of the terms by Qualia, which is the central kind of idea throughout this summer school. I'm going to define it intentionally loosely. This is sometimes if you look at consciousness literature book or paper, it's explained as a phenomenal consciousness, a subjective experience, a content of consciousness, qualitative aspects of consciousness, feelings, or what it is like to be something. And all of this, I first broadly consider as Qualia. And non-Qualia, on the other hand, is going to be anything you do not have any experience, like any kind of, let's say, emotional response in the gut or whatever that you just cannot directly experience. Okay, so so-called unconscious response or unconscious, tendency or motivation. All of this will be not on Qualia. But there are lots of borderline cases of the Qualia, such as cognitive concepts or logic or thinking. Like, what does it mean to feel like 3 + 5 is 8 or 3 + 5 is 7? 3 + 5 + 5 is 7 sounds a bit strange, right? Because there is the innate kind of feeling of the error, and that kind of associated feelings are definitely Qualia. But 3 + 5 = 8 itself, whether that's Qualia or not, unclear. Okay, so I'll just leave it as a borderline. And then psychophysical and the neuroscientific concepts are sometimes also intentionally confused with the Qualia or side of the things that you consider as a consciousness or content of consciousness. For example, class of the theory called the identity theory identifies such as some kind of neural activity as Qualia, as experience. This is a bit confusing from this perspective. And the much of the things that we talk, for example, integrated information theory identifies, for example, not the psychological or neuroscientific concepts, but so-called cause and effect, cause-effect information structure. Cause-effect structure is identified as Qualia in some cases. But I propose to initially start with Qualia as this phenomenal experience, and then some possibly correlated, possibly identifiable structure as a separate thing to begin with. Okay. And so some of the confusion, like some types of physical substrates, things or processes, dynamics of how things moves or structure or all the behaviors can be confused, but not Qualia itself in many cases. It's maybe a bit confusing, but I hope that it is going clearer. And then one example of this Qualia in this case, for example, let's say you see this moment of the experience is this type of the experience. When you open your eyes briefly and you see it. And then if your eyes are focused on somewhere around here, then you will experience the local color of the, okay. So about this one. So when you are looking at this sunset and then paying attention to, or directly fixating on the red part or yellow part, then you will see a particular color Qualia and also shape Qualia and so on. And if you're looking at for a slightly more extended duration of time, then you may feel some kind of a sadness or excitement or whatever it is that you associate with this image. And all of these emotion is also part of the qualia. And usually we call this comparable aspect of a narrow aspect of the experience, such as shape or color or the object such as sun, as a narrower and narrower qualia that can be compared with different place. But a broader qualia is eventually it will become the moment of experience, which is unique to any time and also space. Okay, and any time of the space, you will have one moment of the broadest sense of qualia, which is composed of various smaller sort of the narrower qualia. That's the idea. Okay. And then historically, and on the everyday level, we usually, communicate, qualia intersubjectively. Usually, I see that red thing, or I'm sad, or whatever. You do it through language, but it's usually not satisfactorily, precise, and that's the cause of many of the miscommunication or, misunderstanding, right? And Hayato over there, and also Steve, who is coming later, together with them, and we propose that maybe this is just a situation of adjunction. It's a first category theoretical kind of idea that I introduced today. It is that structural correspondence between the two, which if I go from here to there and then coming back, then there is a systematic deviation from the original point. That's the situation of adjunction. And as you might have seen, Rosiak's book, See from Example, shows this inflation of the letter and then sort of shrinking of the letter. That's also nice kind of example of the adjunction, right? Well, like if you can imagine letter A, if you inflate a lot, then that hole in the A just disappears at some point. And then if you shrink it, then that the disappeared hole does not recover, right? But going back and forth, there is some kind of difference that can be recovered for the original thing. That's the idea of adjunction. And so according to this kind of situation, the philosophers who mainly use language as their tool of the investigation have been quite sort of pessimistic about any research program about qualia, especially analytical philosophers. By Dennett is one example, and quite influenced by these kind of ideas. Studies on consciousness, especially around the 1990s, or it became pretty popular in 2000, started to focus on the binary response paradigm. So where you show some kind of stimulus, and then people are just saying, "Oh, that is visible, yes or no," or that looked like red or green, something like that. Categorization. And that's much easier to communicate and so define also whether things are valid or not, right? And this type of the binary response paradigm has become combined with the neuroimaging or neural recording experiment, and then try to find the neural correlates of consciousness. And that's the sort of the very, very rough summary of the things that happened over the 30 years or so. Then we are in this situation where Bain and Seth, this review paper is quite useful and interesting to summarize the currently proposed number of the theories of consciousness. It is at least, okay, it's not at most, it's at least 40 theories of consciousness. And nobody probably really understands what each theory is talking about. But probably part of the reason of this explosion of theories of consciousness is, as Kleiner recently pointed out, is due to this binary response nature that constrains any kind of theories. If you say that, under this situation, people may say yes or no. That's a really weak kind of, constraint. So you can come up with, theories as you like. But we actually have been proposing this structure approach, Qualia Structure Paradigm, is quite explicitly from 2016 or so, but more roughly 2016, but started more seriously in 2020 or so. And here the idea is to characterize Qualia through the Yoneda lemma, which is the second concept in the category theory that I introduced today. The idea of the Yoneda lemma is that maybe, yes, it is difficult to characterize what the red is, or what the sun is, or what the brightness is, or what your sadness is in itself, but its relation to all other objects, that's another concept, in the category is characterized. And then that means this HA. A and B are the things that you want to compare, whether they are the same or different. Is my red the same as my green or something like that? If you want to do that, then A and B and all other objects that you're thinking to compare or to construct a hypothetical Qualia structure needs to be compared with all other objects. Like here in this case, it's a color similarity. A to other color similarity, you just measure it systematically, and B to other colors, and then you measure it systematically. And then if they are as a set of the relations, same, HA is the same as HB, then A and B must be the same. So that's the consequence of the Yoneda lemma paradigm. And this is an inspiration of the Yoneda lemma, and we want to apply this as a Qualia structure paradigm. I was actually going to erase this from the slide, but let's see. It's not. So far, that's a sort of starting point of the Qualia structure paradigm, and maybe during the discussion time, you can discuss or review, maybe starting from what is a category as opposed to set. Roughly speaking, category consists of the objects and also its relation arrows. And there needs to be some kind of condition that needs to be satisfied. It's a category actions. And as opposed to set is just a collection of objects only, without any relationship between them. But we want to understand, or we want to treat Qualia as an explicit collection of objects plus relations. Red is not red because it's only red, but it looks like that in relation to others. Not only simultaneously, but also counterfactually as well. And this idea is very sort of familiar to, for example, linguistic kind of definition of the meaning as well, right? Meaning of the word is also defined through the relationship with other words, not word itself. Apple's meaning is not defined by the sound of apple itself, but its relation to other things as well. All right, so that's our objects, arrows, and then the category related to graph. That's another kind of relatively common thing, question that you may be wondering. But in the case of a graph, you just need to connect the object, and that's it. But in the case of the category, the requirement of the category is that all these arrows, if they are going from this to that and that, then you need to also have another path from here to here. But the graph doesn't need to satisfy that. And also all the graph can be converted into category and so on. And then the functor and natural transformation, I'm going to talk about it towards the end, so I'll just skip it for here. But the functor is, in a sense, sort of transformation from one category to another category. That's a functor. And then, so roughly speaking, let's say when I talked with Masafumi, then there may be some kind of implicit rule for what I mean and how he interprets. And this transformation of the meaning is functor in this direction. And then I try to understand Masafumi, that's another functor. And if that has a slight, kind of deviation from the original, that's the situation of the two functors are in the adjoint situation. Okay. But if Masafumi is completely crazy under the drug or whatever, then if I go there and then he goes somewhere else, and then that's the kind of situation, non-adjoint situation. All right. Okay. And then maybe I'll, by the way, share these slides later. So if you can if you want, you can take a look at this for your preparation of the discussion, but just go through this relatively quickly. Yeah, another thorny question is that the underlying assumptions of why your lemma can be applied to the Qualia situation. So this requires a couple of assumptions. One is that Qualia or things that we are interested in has to satisfy the condition of category or enriched category, so-called. And initially, when we proposed this, kind of a category theoretical approach, then some people criticized because the category theory cannot deal with, graded, relationship. Like, red and orange is more similar compared to red and green. What we are saying is, just rubbish. But no, that's not the case. Actually, a relationship can be graded. And that's, if you want to go into that direction, you need to learn something called enriched category. And the enriched category is almost like a metric space that you probably use all the time for computational science or something like that. That has a distance combined with the category theory in a sense, but it's much looser in a sense, and also it's richer. But it also means it's a bit complicated as well. And then so how can we disprove that our project actually works? Maybe according to this, you can also think about it, right? Okay, so this is how to disprove what Nao is saying. And what are the possible examples of objects and arrows that will not work? Think about all the possible Qualia. Maybe Francesco is interested in justice or something like that. Then how can we think about the Qualia of the concepts? And then what's the appropriate arrows relationship? This is a kind of interesting question to discuss possibly. And then another thing is that is there any intrinsic aspects of experience that cannot be captured by any type of arrows? I think some of you guys might have already discussed in the preschool journal graph, but Yoneda lemma is just a relationship with other types of Qualia, right? And although this is a mathematical proof that things property to other things exhausts all the things that you can have about itself, it feels a bit counterintuitive, isn't it? Right? This is just external. And Qualia is intrinsic. So how can it be possible that all the extrinsic relation can exhaust intrinsic? But this is a mathematical fact if there are some certain conditions are met. So if you can come up with any kind of examples, that would be great. Okay. So I can take a break here, but maybe shall we continue? So because we a bit started a bit late. So far, is there any question?
Thanks. Just a really simple question. I saw something on the slide about processes not being qualia, but I wonder about things like movement in the visual field. Is movement itself not a qualia?
No. So movement itself is not qualia.
But
sure? if you are moving and this movement is associated with some kind of subjective feeling, that part is qualia. But the movement itself, like this one just move or something, it's not the qualia, right?
How would you relate that to, say, Husserl's time consciousness and like protension and retention, and that within one moment of experience there is this temporal context? From that point of view, I would look at movement and certain processes as qualia.
Yeah, so if you experience it, yes.
Yeah.
But if you are not experiencing, and if you want to generally talk about process or movement or time passage itself as qualia, then from this kind of the definition point of view, it's not immediately clear whether that should be qualia or not. But it may be, after we understand everything, it may be that this kind of process might be highly correlated or highly identifiable with the experience. That's a possibility. But starting point wise, it's not super immediately clear, right?
Okay.
Can you say more about the borderline case? For example, why 2 + 3 is 5 is not the content of consciousness? I mean, it doesn't make sense for me.
I also think so. But logic is actually very difficult to think from the sort of this Qualia research at the moment. I don't know. This is something that you guys should also discuss possibly. So one of the, for example, inspiring figure by Penrose. I don't know if you have seen something like this, but this is a physical, and this is a mental, and this is a logic. And then he kind of suggests this kind of, diagram. Logic, and then experience, and also physical, or something like that. May be wrong, but logic and also mathematics, these two things are potentially, independent of our experience. Right? After we fix the initial assumption, it might follow certain rule, regardless of this, how the world is, done. And then the part of that logic may be the mechanism of the Qualia and, physical. So from that point of view, it's not super clear to me.
It's related to what Nata said, and about this idea of cognitive phenomenology. There is a debate going in philosophy, which is precisely the debate called on cognitive phenomenology. There is a book by Bain et al. 2010 that collected a lot of the positions in this framework, and there are two main camps: broad or like liberal interpretations, and narrower or more conservative interpretations. And the conservative people say feelings associated with cognitive phenomenology are just sensory in nature. It seems to us that there is some cognitive phenomenology, but we are duped by our own mind. And the liberal people say, yeah, there is cognitive phenomenology. And the most easy, like the easiest argument and good argument to give for that there being cognitive phenomenology is that we have transparent access to the cognitive content of our thoughts. When I think about Gödel's incompleteness theorem and I try to run the proof in my mind, I know what I'm thinking about. As I know what I'm thinking about assuming, as I know when I look at the background and I perceive black on white and some gray there. So it's like the same standard of transparency, and that's the best argument for there being cognitive phenomenology.
Yeah. Maybe is it okay if I just proceed and then take questions further? All right. So then let's move on to this empirical research example. So this is just a list of the things that we have been doing, and also we published to some extent over the last few years from our group. And first focus was the color. Makiko Yamada over there and Masafumi and I started with the smaller version of the Qualia Structure project in 2020. And there we strategically focused on the color aspect of the Qualia. And that's because, color, it has some kind of everyday relevance. And also everybody more or less, agrees that it is the Qualia, right? So we did a bunch of the online experiments, and also Masafumi is going to talk about the computational approach to how to analyze this in a novel way. And then Makiko recently put the preprint and also put the YouTube video on fMRI data, which we are also extending and also improving. And then the development, he's not here today, but Yusuke Moriguchi has collected the data. He's actually a supervisor of the Ryoichi from 3 to 4 years old until adults using similarity experiments. So we are doing a bunch of stuff. We are not going to talk about it. And then also attention, visual attention, how it actually changes or not change experience or Qualia is something that we are also trying to work and hopefully to publish it by the end of this year. Then emotion, also initially we were told by the experts that it's impossible to rate the similarity of the emotion, but it is actually, at least in our hands, possible. And this project Lipen is doing is to compare the emotion evoked by the movies, just a 3 seconds movies, and then ask do it online. And then we found that if people self-identify as some kind of alexithymia, which is difficulty in experiencing emotion or expressing the emotion, their structure is different from the normal people. So that's something that we can also apply Masafumi's technique, and then we are quite confident about that results right now. And then all of this so far has been done online, and one of the very frequent criticism has been that oh, you're assuming that everybody is the same. We didn't explicitly, but many people say that. So Asano-san, who is probably coming today, but she's not here maybe, and Saji-san are actually compiled 100 different Japanese sounds, like a, I, U, E, O, kaki, peko, sashi, blah, 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 papi, pepo, blah, 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 and then compared all the combination of the 100 by 100 sounds, and they ask the similarity, like is I similar to ki, u, o, and so on, and then but done all in one individual. And we have collected 8 subjects data, and then demonstrate basically that we can collect this kind of data if you are patient enough and work with Japanese people probably. And then so we are also extending this kind of idea into something also weird, like a sports movies right now with some student and sentence that Zoe is doing with Norie, and also sound itself, and also words as well. And most of the time, this is kind of assumed from the physical similarity to the experiential similarity, right? So many people do not actually, bother to ask this similarity of the experience. And the thing that I'm going to focus today is about the visual motion. The sense of the visual motion, which is sort of related to James' kind of question. Like if you see this kind of movement, then it's obvious that physically things are moving from here to here, and you are experiencing in Qualia from here to here, right? So far as I know, nobody asked whether it's interesting even to do the similarity experiment with the motion. But there are several reasons why I think it is interesting. So that kind of idea is called direct realism in philosophy. Idea is that, and so probably Robert is going to talk a bit maybe on tomorrow, but the very, very strong kind of idea in philosophy and also naive people is that consciousness or Qualia is to mirror what's happening in the world. Right, so the visual motion is definitely in that kind of case. If there is some kind of motion, cockroach moving from there, you want to kind of avoid. And if that motion is illusory, then that's not so good, right? Survive for survival reason. So that's the idea of the direct realism. I don't know whether you're going to talk about it, but then just briefly, this is very wrong, and many ways you can actually prove it, but think about the amount of the sugar in the food, for example, right? If the amount of the sugar is directly experienceable, and then it's directly connected to the sort of feeling of the happiness or something like that, you just keep on eating. It's a linear relation. It should map onto linear relation in our experience, and that's deemed to be very bad for the survival. And many things are like that. Color is also only part of the visible light wavelength is visible. So whatever it is, humans and the biological organism is cutting or sub-selecting the things that they want and then constructing much richer world based on that kind of things. So that's my take. And also it's also consistent with Robert's collaborators, Donald Hoffman as well. And I think IIT is also the consistent with this idea, right? So what do you see here? Yeah, it's moving a lot, right? It's generated by one of the Japanese most famous illusion artists slash researcher Kitaoka, snake illusion. This is completely stationary, but most of the people cannot help seeing the motion. So there is at least, strong cases where the phenomenology, qualia of what you have, and physical is quite dissociated. So we decided to start this online experiment. We thought that it may be completely uninteresting, boring kind of experiment, but we just decided to do that. And then I'll briefly also, maybe you might want to discuss at some point what the caveats of the online experiments and also similarity experiments. What can we do with online experiment that we cannot do in the lab experiments? And I'll give an example so you might be able to have a better idea about these things. So the first experiment that Callum Robinson did is over the time, first people press the button and they show the moving stimulus like here. And then another moving stimulus is flashed on the display as well. And then finally, each subject will give a response of the similarity. +4 is most similar between the two motion. And then -4 is the most dissimilar. Okay. And then go to the next trial. And this is done all online. Okay. This is a movie. And this is a demo version, so it's very slow. But in the real experiment, each of the motion is presented only 100 milliseconds or 500 milliseconds. This is roughly like 1 second or something like that. But do you get the idea? It's very intuitive, right? So you don't need much instruction, and you can just do -4 to +4, blah blah blah. Okay. And then the initial result looks like this. So this is a probably key figure that also you will see in Masafumi's talk, as I also see it. X-axis and the Y-axis are the two stimuli that you are comparing. Okay. So in this case, we already collapsed to make this matrix into symmetric. But in reality, there is a first stimulus and then second stimulus presented, separately. And then if the two stimulus is in the same direction, like 0 degree and 0 degree, meaning to the right, then in this particular experiment, everybody pretty much said it's most similar. And then if it was compared with 144 degree, which is like diagonal opposite, then that's most dissimilar. So what do you notice from this similarity matrix? Yeah, Jiao, can you use the mic? Wait.
Zero degrees motion is more related to 180 than to 90, for instance.
Right. So hopefully you can see this diagonal here and also diagonal here is much stronger than the 45 degree or 137 or 5 degree. And this is possible to capture by the technique called multidimensional scaling. That's also another key kind of technique for the visualization. So what multidimensional scaling tries to do is to treat each of these direction as or qualia, in my case, as an object or point, and then treating the similarity or dissimilarity, to be more precise, as a distance between each point, and then to try to keep the distance relation best as possible. The original data is much higher dimension, but you can compress it using some algorithm. And this is the result of this multidimensional scaling. And a dimension 1 and dimension 2 doesn't mean like principal component or something like that. But as you can see, each of this pair going opposite direction is more similar, close to each other, not identical, but it's very related. And then also the orientation composes this structure. So that's what we find first with the online experiment. And then some very minority of the people, but constantly, roughly 20% to 30% people do distinguish the opposite direction as the most dissimilar. But for some reason, 80% of people say that the opposite is very similar. We don't know exactly why, but that's the sort of the reason. Yes, Alex.
Have you tried dots instead of gratings?
That's an excellent question. And if somebody wants to do it, then that's an excellent second week project, I think. No, we haven't. So the reason why we actually even started thinking about doing this experiment is that our collaborator, Jiahao and Yumiko in Japan, have already collected the neural data using very similar kind of set of the stimuli. So we were able to actually compare that. That's the idea. So there, they used only 8 possible directions, but at a different spatial frequency. And all of them are presented at the 2 Hz. So it goes relatively quickly. But because there are 48 possible stimulus combinations, usually before that Asano-san's experiment, we thought that it's impossible to ask people to do this 2,500 trials, right? So we just did it online. With the online experiment, this type of the experiment can be collected just 1 hour for more than 200 people. So if you can program in the second week, you can do as many experiments as you want, really. So to make this kind of stimulus, we made the stimulus as close to as possible to mouse type experiment. Like mouse has a very bad visual, acuity. We need to make things all the full field, and then this is as close as possible that we could do for the Miyumiko's experiment. But in the humans case, we did ask the similarity rating. Okay. Then here's the result of the human version of the similarity matrix. So that reflects the Qualia structure, I think. So what you are seeing is that it's first grouped by the directions, from 0 to 315. But within each box, it goes from low frequency to high frequency. Okay, and then as you can see, first of all, the similar directions are paired with each, right? More or less first, regardless of the spatial frequency. And that's and again, 180-degree difference is again rated as similar in this case, replicated. Now, grouping by the spatial frequency, it starts to become less clear, but you see still that diagonal structure is very wide. So identical stimulation is rated as more similar, and also 180-degree difference, like here, is quite similar overall, right? So by applying MDS algorithm with this and project it into first, 2-dimensional, to facilitate the understanding, we get this first. And what it means is that this left side of the things are 2 for spatial frequency, low spatial frequency motion. And the horizontal and vertical are kind of grouped, but diagonal ones are very far. And then same goes for 8.6 medium spatial frequency and highest frequency. And also you can see that the medium, the lowest to highest, has some kind of ordering. This is unidimensional. This is not super interesting, but within the motion, there is some kind of interesting topology starting to emerge. And this is also visualized. This can be visualized by 3D here. And here it's ordering of this 2 to 64 is very clear. And then if you also order, see it in a different angle, still in 3D, this is 0 to 180, and this is 90 to 70, and this is for other diagonals. And that's the sort of the structure of experience of the visual motion, at least with using the grating, okay? So the question is how the neurons in the mice visual cortex would react to this set of the stimuli and also can generate the corresponding structure. So that's a question. But so far, is there any question or comments? Is it fine? Renzo.
So just to see if I understand, that means that there are three sort of macro groupings of motion experience. There's like the vertical, the horizontal, and diagonal, and all diagonals are similar between themselves.
Right. According to this stimulus set. Any other comments? Fine. Okay. Yeah.
Is the distance within the sort of like preserved across? So the whole space is proportional to the distance, or is it distorted?
It's distorted, but it's minimally distorted according to some certain criteria. Kenneth?
Regarding the experiment with the gratings and your result, your main result that people perceive opposite directions the same way. I'm wondering, is that more a feature of just, these are sinusoidal waves, right?
Yes.
Is this more a feature of just sinusoidal waves than it is of visual consciousness? By which I mean, if you have a sine wave, you flip it 180 degrees, it's going to look the same, forwards and backwards, right? So is that a property of the waves or consciousness?
Okay, so maybe one thing I should clarify, right? This is all the similarity experiments, okay? And it's not asking you or asking the participants to discriminate. So I'm pretty sure that all of the stimulus that we presented is possible to discriminate 100% accuracy. But when we ask whether they are similar or dissimilar, this is natural categorization, natural response that they say, which reflects a sort of the part of experience. And probably in this case, there is some kind of weighting between the orientation and also motion. And probably orientation is kind of dominating our experience, right? Probably. And that's the kind of thing.
Oh, sorry. Can I just follow up on that very quickly? If you're asking people, are two stimuli similar or dissimilar, doesn't that imply a sort of discrimination between the two?
You need to do the experiment by yourself, probably.
Yes.
Some people probably do it naturally.
Right.
But our instruction, according to several iteration of the experiments, we have come up with instruction that tries to naturally induce the innate sort of similarity. And also, you can also compare the instruction in different way. Like in this case, for example, if you pay attention to the grating, density or direction of stimulus, how does the stimulus look like? Or, just, don't think about it too much or something like that. Yeah, it's one, active area of the research, how the instruction can change the Qualia structure. Matteo?
I just have a question about the concept of similar. When you ask people, is this similar? Because, so to me, the thing that you realize when sometimes people rate 180 degree as more similar or as the opposite, to me, it boils down to what's the concept that you apply when you're thinking about what is similar, right? Do you clarify at all what you mean, or you just judge similarity? Because it seems to me, if I interpret similar as how much I have to rotate the thing, then 180 is the most similar. But if you interpret that as just, can I just flip it, right? And then it's very similar. So do you clarify at all what you mean by similar?
We don't clarify that to the level that the philosophers are satisfied. And we try not to recruit the philosophers as a participant. No. But to be more serious, I think it's a very good point. But at the same time, if that's one of the advantage of the online experiments. We are dealing with the normal people, right, with the minimum instruction, and then we are also, getting the data from 500 people. So it is a representative human experience, regardless of the understanding of what the similarity means. And most effective instruction is actually the feedback. We present the stimulus, and then when the people say that +1, then you said in this trial +1, which means that it's slightly similar. And then that kind of feedback, without really giving whether it was correct or not, just stabilize their performance. And by the way, we actually, I didn't tell you about this, but all of these experiments, we do, for example, in this case, it's probably 300 trials per participant over 30 minutes. And then the first part of the experiment, 200 trials, and the last part of 100 trials are just a repeat of the subset of the trials. And if the people do not respond in a consistent way, then we do not take that participant, right? Because here we don't have a correct answer. We can't, we need to think about many ways, and this so-called double pass correlation seems to make most sense so far. But that's also another interesting kind of project or question. Maybe we can take it later. Is it okay? Yeah. Okay, so then about the mouse. So the mouse in visual cortex, this is what Yumiko has obtained, and maybe Graham and other people are doing this kind of experiment. But currently, neuroscientists can color or target, the particular neurons, and in this case, it's a identification of the individual neurons, which is very, very small. This is the size of the 100 micrometer. Okay, so it's very precise kind of a control, and we can do it under anesthetized and awake condition of the same mouse, apart in 1 hour or something like that. And then if you look at focus on one particular cell, then anesthetized or awake state sometimes show the difference, like high frequency versus this is a different direction, and then direction-wise, it's the same direction that they are responding, but the spatial frequency-wise, awake and anesthesia changed responsibility in this case. And then skipping everything right now. What do you expect in terms of the correspondence between the structure of the visual motion qualia, estimated from humans, and the structure of the visual neural activity in mice? And I'm pretty sure that there will be a lot of questions, criticism, and so on. So feel free to do it, and list things during the discussion point. And then if you don't present it, I'll just take it, and I'll see it. And then what's the strongest claim that you can potentially make? What's the limitation? And also, what's the actual prediction? That's the most interesting thing I want to ask from you guys. And then don't be afraid to be wrong, but just think about it as a kind of registered report of the thought experiments. So in the afternoon, in the follow-up lecture, I might actually talk about the result of this experiment, but after hearing what you guys think about this, I will not present it now. So the rest of the time, I want to talk a little bit about the future outlook and constructing Qualia periodic table to dissolve the hard problem of consciousness. And this is the new part that I haven't actually given a talk at all, so you guys are test bed. This is the Mendeleev's, Russian chemist periodic table at the time of 1969. It's relatively new, right? And it seems that he didn't have the helium and also neon and also 1869. Okay, I just got it from the web, so sorry. Don't blame me. It's a website. Okay. But at the time, many of the things are missing, and so the helium and so on are also missing. But it was very inspiring, and also it organized the number of the atoms, the positron and the electron, And also the layers of the atoms and so on afterwards we discovered, right? And this is, I think, I learned it. I should have actually checked it, but he organized this table by primary observation of the each things and property and its relation to other atoms, right? So what we are doing is kind of similar in a sense. It's a very, very high level similarity thing that I want to propose. So this is our Qualia periodic table potentially. Here, just to go through, space is the one that some of you have already presented in the preschool journal club, but Tononi and Hong suggested maybe there is some kind of very, very fundamental sense of the quality of the space, right? And then time is the one that Matteo and also Renzo have been working on, and it's not available yet. Very soon. But they will be talking about this on Thursday. I think Julio is going to talk about it. And then other things are more or less, my intuition, but I also talked a lot about this other qualia with many people. And then this is probably more or less reasonable kind of placement, I think. Sound is more closer to probably time qualia, for example. And the space has some stuff about, spatial thing like touch, and this is mostly vision. And then emotion is probably, especially feeling one is higher level, but more primordial kind of stuff like thirst or pain and so on. That's probably at closer to upper level. Maybe not really close to the space itself. I don't know. Joanna may have some ideas about this, but let me go first. And then here's in a sense, shape of the atom or like a motion qualia, hypothetical thing, right? And then in the sort of I kind of expected James' sort of idea, but the space and time is somehow kind of related to motion, right? In some way. So there must be some. I wouldn't think that they are fundamentally the same, but it's probably related in some way. And this relation is because a structure to structure relationship, it's best described as probably a functor, most likely. It may go one way or the other way around, but that's one idea. And then the color is something that we have been examining a lot. And I think it's probably less fundamental compared to the texture, but it's derived a purified version of the things. And so I just put it in below texture. And the shape and the objects are also quite related to these kind of ideas. So I think there may be some kind of a relationship here as well. And then the structure of the space and time, yeah, if you already read the paper, then you may have some ideas, but Julio is going to give a talk on Thursday. And then I also think that the more higher order kind of atoms or qualia, like uranium or things that are unstable, they are probably more culturally or learning dependent and less shared across a species. So the idea is that it goes probably over below, then maybe generally it's more concept-like thing, and possibly the topology becomes tree-like, like knowledge uniformly. But above these kind of things, they may have a more interesting topology, like with lots of holes and different kind of shapes, and how it combines are defined in some particular relationship. This is all hypothetical. And this itself is not super interesting, I think. Okay, from here it becomes highly category theoretical. And my idea is that this motion Qualia structure, starting from there, and then we should get this information structure of the motion. in mice or human, ideally human. And then there must be some kind of correspondence. And this translation is, again, it's a structure to structure, so it's a functor at least, if it exists. And this is the f of motion. And then maybe, from there to predict the structure of the qualia of the motion. That's also probably possible. Once we are successful, we should be able to do this, either human or mice. And then that's this direction and this direction of two different functors are potentially, equivalent. You can go back and forth. And that's the sort of the many authors who propose this type of the structure approach as hope or default assumption. It's called isomorphism. You can go back and forth and then remain there. But I think this is very unlikely empirically, at least. And also theoretically, it's not necessarily true, especially across the individual subjects who has the same experience. And also Chalmers, if I remember, he also talked something like that as a psychophysical laws, right? And other people have talked about this as well. And then adjoint situation is probably something that no other people have thought about. Now, the critical thing is we can probably do this, and we should do this for different types of the qualia. And that's the key of this periodic table idea, right? And then let's say from information structure to qualia structures, the collection of the functors we can collect. And then there should be, again, some kind of relationship between these functors, right? So that is, so let's say this one is a space qualia, space information structure to space qualia functor. And this is the pain. And this is the, I don't know, motion or something like that. And then here, the three arrows here, this is critical. So space to pain and pain to motion. If there are some transformation of this rule of the functor to functor, and that also is consistent with going from space to directly to motion, meaning that two arrows can compose, then that's a situation called natural transformation. Two functors compose into one in a consistent way. Okay, and at this point, you may still claim that category theory is too complicated and unuseful, but I think this level of the structure to structure and the structure of structure mapping and the mapping to mapping relationship is very difficult to deal with without category theoretical thinking. At least I couldn't actually imagine something like this before. Now I can do it relatively easy. And then sometimes it may be possible from going one functor to another functor and then back as well. And that's called the natural equivalence, right? No, wait. Can you use it?
I think your idea is very exciting, but from mathematical side, a very technical thing is, I think I can make some foundation for your idea, but the point is the technical definition of natural transformation is this domain. Domain means this upper side should be the same.
I see.
And so maybe if I don't know, it's precise, but maybe the information structure is more simple than the
qualia structure.
And maybe some kind of the same information structure goes to the different kind of qualia by the some environmental or some conditional situation. It's also a very exciting hypothesis. In that case, your idea, natural transformation will be good.
Right. So just to make sure, so if this is a part of this, right? If this is a much bigger space, and then this is also part of this, then calling this as a natural transformation should be.
What I would point out is, if you compare the two functions by means of natural transformation, you need to have the two categories, and the information structure should have a kind of the common one. Common, and then the arrows, blue arrows, should have the common origin. So maybe you need to modify.
Yeah.
Or
yeah.
My idea is to make your idea modify to the natural transformation idea. Then maybe the more exciting potential.
Right.
Potentially.
Okay.
The hypothesis.
Thank you. So that reveals my limitation of the category theory, and I this is also a great part of this interdisciplinary research, right? I don't want to justify myself, but yeah, I think this kind of thing is the one that I want to definitely achieve. Anyway, coming back to this idea again, so natural transformation or something like that may be there, and the point I wanted to make was that this level of the description, this itself is another abstract level of the periodic table, right? If you can imagine that, if you slice it at that, place, then you see lots of, arrows traversing that, plane. And that periodic table and how it's related to each other probably ends at the level of the natural laws. This is my, at this point in my time, I feel like this is the best I can imagine. And it already, in my opinion, dissolved the hard problem. It, the usual kind of idea of the hard problem is that, it feels like, physical stuff in the brain, and the qualia has to be related in some way, but it's just impossible to understand or think about alternative ways. And but if the data is so much constrained in this level, then even the logically possible zombie type ideas of the qualia has to satisfy this level of the thing. And that's very difficult to imagine how else it can be, in my opinion. And at least, some of the, most of the empirically oriented people will not be baffled by the possibility of the simple logical possibility argument of the zombie, because the real world is constrained this level of the thing, right? Like periodic table, the chemical periodic table, you can also say that, yeah, this may be how the world looks like, but in fact it is not. That's a sort of the periodic table version of the zombie argument, but nobody cares about it anymore because this one has so much explanatory power. I mean this one, this this and its further things, because it has an explanatory power and it has also predictive power and also theoretical power, and it also induces the leaping of the theoretical prediction into the future, right? So all of this may be my illusion or delusion, but I think I can't think of otherwise at the moment, and many things can be done and has to be done. Nata? Can you?
I'm thinking the information structure and the qualia structure here you represent, what do you concern at the central point? Is there a functional role in constituting some more general feeling, for example? Or like, for example, the constitutive role of space when we're thinking about movement, for example? Or the qualia itself, or some other perspective you might have in mind. Because when you're saying, for example, the natural law plays some role as a explanatory role, say, It seems like you don't really consider every perspective of qualia or the information, right? You have some specific thing here, but you didn't say.
I mean, I don't fully understand your question, so maybe we can talk about it later.
Yeah,
But the one thing that I want to emphasize is that I really think that, at the end, especially for the really low level, helium or hydrogen atom like qualia, it's probably misleading to start thinking about functions in terms of the usefulness or survival, purpose. But more to do with it's the way the world is. I can elaborate it more, but if you start thinking about how the qualia is useful or how it must be useful to remain as a survival kind of value, then many things just becomes very weird. The most famous kind of argument is epiphenomenalism, right? You can imagine things that does not have things, but still, if you assume that same organism can behave the same way, then why do we have a qualia? And from the evolutionary point of view, just one brief argument is that I think many are influenced too much by the idea that surviving organism is the most fitted to the environment, but that's not true in many cases. Especially humans are easy way to think about it, but the individual species or subspecies who are not fitted with the environment, that goes distinct. But if they have an additional capability or additional luxury, it doesn't work as a strong sort of force to remove them from the competition. It all depends on the environmental competition and so on. But the point is, I think we should also think about it throughout the summer course. But functionalism is misleading to think about the qualia, I think. Just maybe I'll just go to the next point. All right, then. So the next point, for the rest of the 10 minutes or so, I'll now try to connect. I just introduced sort of the potential atoms of the experience, right, as a periodic table. But that's not enough, right? The moment of experience like this is broad qualia. And how can we go from narrow to broad is unclear. And if we go this kind of analogy, qualia as an atom goes to molecule, and then molecule goes to this, then maybe there's a way to think about it. So thinking about how do the narrower qualia combine or compose to generate a broader qualia is key issue to understand this. And how do space and time relate to other features and contents? If you read Horn and Tononi, then they are kind of sort of the made a foundation of this sort of pizza, the most plain pizza dough, right? In a sense, but you need to put something else to generate this type of experience. And how do we do that? And that's the free sheaf or sheaf idea that I think is most useful. And then that's where Michael's lecture and Donna's lectures are going to be very useful, I think. And here is a relation between the space qualia and the content type qualia, I think. This is one example, okay? Is that if you fixate on this picture at the center, then the visual field or spots are likely to be kind of expanding as you go to the periphery, like visual field, the receptive field in the neurons. And we can consider a set of these covering regions as X, set of X, that goes from one means, let's say, angle. And then the second number refers to the eccentricity. And then you can cover this entire visual field with X11 to X85 or something like that. And then this can form a topological space. I'm not going to explain these details. But idea is that if you start thinking about that, it becomes pretty straightforward to think about different types of qualia that is local, like color, and global, like concept, right? And then if you if you identify some spot, x11 has this color, then you can experience that color as they are, right? And then if there is some kind of boundary, there's no problem. Red, green, green, red, red. That's how you are experiencing. But the medium level kind of, things that requires the combination of the low level things like x11 and x12, both green, then ball, this kind of situation requires sort of building up from the bottom to the top. And then once you have a top, then you can also kind of go down. Because there's a green ball, then the points must be green. And so this direction of the bottom up and the top down, if it's possible to do for everything, then that's shift, right, Michael? Yeah. But in the case of phenomenology, it's not always the case that you can go both top and then bottom. And that's why I put this pre-shift. Before becoming shift, it's a partially kind of shift. So something like this, like x11, x81 can indicate man, but if you add something more like x85, then hypothetically, this man shouldn't be there. I don't know whether maybe it is part of the indoor or picture or something like that. And then there is some kind of discrepancy or contradiction. So something like this is potentially, describable as a shift or pre-shift. And sometimes this contradiction and sort of inconsistency in terms of logic has been argued as how illusory or how wrong our perception is, which itself is pretty wrong kind of idea, I think. But you may know this Penrose triangle, right? And this is also sometimes called the impossible triangle. But this is possible. You can construct it physically in 3D, and also you can hold it, and also you can actually just see it as possible, right? But what is impossible for these people who call it as impossible is that it's conceptually impossible, right? But if you think about this kind of shift theoretical ideas, the local bits are there, and that's what you are experiencing almost all the time. But the higher concept can sometimes work, but may not work all the time. And that's potentially, again, a pre-shift as a default mode of the experience of the how the space builds to the concept. And this Necker cube is also another thing where the baseline spots and also edge, they are the same all the time. But a higher level concept, whether the left side is front or right side is front, that switches in consciousness. But that doesn't mean that you are not experiencing this edges and the space behind each moment. So sometimes people say, I use this Necker cube as your consciousness goes from one to the other each moment, but it's part of the experience. The baseline phenomenology stays the same, but the interpretation just flips and so on. That is quite consistent with this Horn Tononi 2024 idea, I think. All right. So how does a pre-shift work? I think you wait for Donna and Michael's lecture, and also there also the Python package is very useful to understand that as well. So the problems and challenges, just a disclosure about this. Would it be feasible to even construct a Qualia periodic table within Qualia domain or information domain or between? And what would be the caveat of this approach? Will it really dissolve the hard problem consciousness? That's something that I want you to also think about, discuss. With that, I think I'll finish for the morning lecture and take a few questions and then let's go to the coffee. Okay. Maybe Francesco first. I'll point to the people who haven't spoken referentially. Next, Lemona.
Thank you very much. Now, could you go back to the slide where you showed the dissolvence of the R problem? So I would like to be sure that I understood. So
This?
yes, exactly. So your idea is that at the level of relations among functors, we can sort of abstract some some natural laws, and this is where we and through these natural laws we should be able to dissolve the R problem. Right. Okay. It just was a clarificatory question to be sure I understood correct.
Yeah, because first, I think, the hard program kind of advocate would say that mapping this is not enough.
Yeah.
And then mapping this is also not enough. And then corresponding that, itself is also, maybe zombie can do that or whatever, I don't believe that. But then if you can have some kind of constraint between these mapping, automatically that starts to become difficult. How exactly is not clear to me, but that's my intuition. But most important thing is also coming back from the original sort of binary paradigm, how binary paradigm has been failing to constrain the theories. Structural approach is much better, much stronger constraint. But this is even the third order structural approach, right? If it is possible. So that's the hope.
Thank you very much.
Lemona.
So I was wondering for the Qualia periodic table, are you suggesting that there's going to be a universal one for the human species, or because surely people's experiences differ, and for the atypical ones, could there be like a private periodic table for each individual? And that kind of complicates things even more, right?
It is a good point, and I haven't thought it very carefully, but I think this level of this, topological features is most likely invariant across the people or species. And that's what I want to find eventually. And if it's not, then maybe this is not a particular type of the, atoms level of the description of experience, most likely. So what I'm saying is that Masami is probably going to talk about the color atypical and the color typical. They don't have a completely different topology. Like, one of them is like, ring, and one of them is double ring, or Möbius ring. That doesn't happen probably. But that's my conjecture.
So you don't want it to be that detailed yet?
We don't have data to constrain. For those who haven't spoken, maybe Miko?
Thank you so much. I think this is genius. But let's say the idea of a periodic table is really good. You just have to put the blocks in correct order, and it has to work both phenomenologically and then mathematically. But to Lemona's, I think some of, let's say, if you have, for example, experienced objects like time and space are necessary for them, there has to be some necessary structure there.
Okay, so for those who haven't spoken, maybe then Matteo and then EJ after.
Oh, hello. Sorry, the idea is amazing, by the way. So my question is more to the information structure. So can you, sorry, because I realized too late, I got lost a moment. So these lines are like, they want to be functors, right?
Right.
So what is the information structure in the Qualia structure again? What is the difference between?
I didn't explain.
Ah, okay. So
And
not
I'll
just me.
explain it in the afternoon.
Okay.
And then DJ.
Yeah, thank you. It's really nice. Could it be possible that for some of these building blocks, to get the functors between them, like for instance, motion, you can construct maybe with space and time, but for some of them, you would need to like rely on information structures, and then it kind of, there could be a circular problem that you can't constrain the functors just in the qualia structure space, but you would need to kind of go and kind of come back.
Can you give an example? Or if you can think about it during the discussion time and then come back later, that would be good.
Yeah.
I can't quickly imagine that. Any other question from those who haven't actually spoken? You haven't, right? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, just to Lamona's point as well, I can see how in broader qualia, you would see high variance even among humans, like say visual hallucinations and psychiatric disorders like schizophrenia, for example. But like going back to something like stimulus orientation in the visual cortex, you can imagine like highly specific lesions in, I forget what region, but where, you know, a number of neurons that are predisposed to detecting orientations like these are now inactive. And you could, I guess I can imagine variants even at these more low level, these low level structures that don't correspond among humans. And I'm just curious how we evolve from that. Like they would clearly not be equivalent to black box.
Yeah, that's a interesting idea. And I haven't thought through very carefully, but at least, you know, these are the types of the qualia which is most likely to be supported by the local neural structure, right? And from the neuroscientific evidence wise, and also from patients' report. About smell and taste, it's unclear whether this is you know, dissociable or whatever. But then if we can reliably construct the information structure from animals with animal reporting, maybe similarity rating or something like that, then we can potentially even imagine that the animal that has an intermediate kind of, you know, experience between the smell and taste, or, you know, motion and space and time and so on. And that the prediction would be that if there is something in between, then this, you know, periodic table may not be as discrete as the case of the atoms, but it's more continuous potentially. That's something interesting potentially, and I think it's not, yeah, infeasible that the distinct kind of the qualia corresponds to very distinctive topological property, like there is a hole here, right, throughout in terms of the direction, but also it's a double kind of, you know, ring, so that, you know, opposite direction is the same, similar. But if you engineer the sort of the animals that has inhibition between the opposite or direction, for example, then they will not have this type of the shape. If that is possible, they probably have a different qualia as well. That's my prediction. So that if individual difference does really, you know, clearly, you know, points to difference in qualia, like for those people who have a color but not color or something like that, then that should be reflected in both, you know, information and so Qualia periodic table type, you know, physical correlates for both. Nicolo.
The question is on
the free shift and the impossible objects. So do you see a possible convergence with predictive processing stories here, for example? Because it kind of sounds quite easy, I think, to tell if you say that the lower level information is there and it's not impossible. And then you say, but perhaps the higher level concepts are not what we expect. And so they just feed back saying like, no, not what I expect, not what I expect. And our uneasiness of the experience would just be the result of these two processes. I don't know, does it make sense?
I mean, it's okay if you want to go that way. But I just don't find that the predictive processing type theory has valid kind of explanatory sort of the power, because they don't do the prediction properly in terms of experience or experiment. What I'm saying is that if they explain or predict the type of the phenomenon according to their theory and then do the registered report, then I totally agree with that. So if you say that any kind of situation where the concept is there but not things are as expected, you always feel uneasiness. If you make that kind of a very precise prediction and then do the registered report, and if it's totally true, I'll start to believe predictive coding. But so far, that hasn't happened. Because it's if it's not as expected, that attracts you more attention, and you try to match with the prediction. Many things are murky at the moment. So maybe we can talk during the break, and so let's break for now.